This is Matthew Cratter from Trader University, and today I want to talk about Bitcoin and the Energy Endgame. We've been talking a lot about in the past few weeks about how the petrodollar is dead. The petrodollar standard was just this loose replacement for the gold standard that was set up in the early 70s after the U.S. closed the gold window. And the basic agreement was that the U.S. would supply Saudi Arabia with weapons, and then in exchange, crude oil, and by extension, all global commodity trade, especially energy, natural gas, crude oil, would be conducted in US dollars. As we've been talking about, the US dollar consensus, this global consensus, has been fraying. The Saudis have been considering accepting yuan instead of dollars in exchange for their crude oil. And what happened last week while I was gone was extremely significant. That's what I want to talk about today. Putin demanding that unfriendly countries, basically the EU and the US, and anyone else involved in sanctioning Russia, would be forced to pay for Russian natural gas using rubles. This has had the effect of really spiking the ruble in various currencies. Here's a chart of the ruble versus the US dollar. When the chart is going down, the US dollar is strengthening. When the chart is going up, the ruble is strengthening against the US dollar. So we can see that the ruble really sold off after the invasion of Ukraine and has subsequently recovered as Putin is engineering demand for rubles. The same thing is happening in the euro as well. Obviously, the EU is highly dependent on Russian energy, especially for heating homes during the winter. So this is the same chart, just denominated in rubles. And we can see that the ruble, the same chart denominated in euros. We can see the ruble here really recovering against the euro. So ruble strengthening both in dollar and in euro terms. If you're finding this video helpful so far, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Maybe share this video with a few friends as well. So Putin has put the EU leaders and the US in a really weird position where now Germany and other EU countries need to sell euros in order to buy rubles in order to pay Russia for its natural gas. There are all these sanctions that are happening, but we can't really, because of how tight global energy supplies are, it's very difficult for Europe to stop accepting Russian energy, and even for the US to stop accepting Russian energy. And so what Putin has done is he's basically made Biden and the EU leaders as well do his bidding. Germany and other EU countries are selling euros, buying rubles so they can buy energy. US needs to sell dollars and buy rubles as well. So that's what we're seeing in both of these charts, where the ruble is strongly recovering. So what does this mean? If Russia is selling their oil and natural gas for rubles, at least to quote-unquote unfriendly countries, which are some of the largest consumers of Russian energy commodities, and if Saudi Arabia is selling oil for Chinese yuan, what this means is there's much less need for countries to stockpile US dollars as a national security measure. You always wanted, if you were a country that was dependent on other countries for your basic commodities, especially for energy, it was always a good idea to keep a stockpile of US dollars that you could use in a crisis or even during normal times to buy crude oil. But if you can pay for Russian crude oil or Saudi crude oil using different currencies, there's less need and there's less demand for US dollars, and by extension for US treasuries, which are denominated in US dollars. US treasuries have really been the reserve asset for the past 50-some years. So what this means is that there's going to be less international demand for the US dollar, for US treasuries. We've talked a lot about this in the past weeks, which means that the Fed is going to need to get back into the money printing business to buy US treasuries to fund US deficit spending and really make up this difference that is lacking because of less international demand for US dollars. Now, it's important to think about this in this way. You can really price any essential commodity or anything that is in really high demand, like crude oil, like natural gas, especially during the winter. You can price these in any currency you want. Currencies in many ways are just a social consensus. They're fairly arbitrary. And whoever has the very valuable commodity or the thing that's in demand can decide what to exchange it for. So Putin has historically been very happy to sell oil for dollars and for euros. Having had his FX reserves confiscated and turned off, he's much less open to that now. So Putin really does have this flexibility. The Saudis have this flexibility. They can price their crude oil and nat gas in euros. They can price it in US dollars. They can price it in gold, obviously, which has been one of the oldest trade currencies and reserve assets. They can also price it in essential supplies like wheat. Obviously, the Ukraine and Russia produce a lot of wheat, but if they needed to, they could sell oil for food as well. And as long as people want crude oil, as long as people want natural gas, they would have to pay using whatever currency Putin decided. You could even sell your crude oil for jelly beans if you wanted. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because we heard the news last week while I was gone that Russia is considering accepting Bitcoin in exchange for their crude oil and natural gas. This was quite surprising to XRP folks who still think that XRP is the global standard, but unfortunately, the Russians did not mention XRP. The actual quote was from Russia's Congressional Energy Committee. It was a guy named Pavel Zavalny who was speaking at a press conference last Thursday, and that the quote, the best translation I could find, is this: when it comes to our friendly countries like China or Turkey, which don't pressure us, in other words, are not involved in sanctions on Russia, then we've been offering them for a while. So in other words, this has been already happening. We've been offering them for a while to switch payments to national currencies like rubles and yuan. This is what Zavalny said during the press conference. With Turkey, it can be lira and rubles. So there can be a variety of currencies, and that's a standard practice. If they want Bitcoin, we will trade in Bitcoin. This is extremely, extremely significant, because what this does is it moves us into the energy endgame, what I'm calling the energy endgame. And it opens up this weird global arbitrage that I'm still trying to sort out in my head, having been away for a week. But basically it works like this. If I have crude oil or natural gas, as we said, I can sell it for anything, any currencies. I can sell it for wheat or gold or jelly beans or euros or rubles. I can also sell it for Bitcoin. But what's interesting about Bitcoin, because it is this energy currency, because of proof of work and how the mining works, I have a choice if I can sell the natural gas or oil in exchange for Bitcoin, or I can actually burn it. Now, this wouldn't normally be done with crude oil itself. It might be done with various derivatives of crude oil, but there certainly is a lot of electricity generated using natural gas, and at a certain price, it might make sense. You can burn your natural gas, turn it into electricity, and then mine Bitcoin with that electricity. So Bitcoin really is here at the center of all of this geopolitical drama because of its proof of work algorithm. And what I think we're in the really early innings of seeing is countries migrating towards pricing crude oil and natural gas in Bitcoin. It makes sense as a global reserve asset. It's much easier to move around than gold, and it can't be sanctioned or turned off like euros or US dollars can. Bitcoin is simply a much better form of money than rubles, lira, euros, or US dollars. And it's long been rumored that Putin has a large personal stash of Bitcoin. So this would make sense that he's naturally incented, of course, for Bitcoin to go up as well. Ultimately, when it comes to commodity pricing and commodities in general, the hardest commodity and the hardest currency wins. And in this case, Bitcoin really is the hardest currency ever created. It's the scarcest. It's going to have the highest stock to flow. It's the easiest to store. It's the easiest to move around. And it's permissionless. It's an open network. Anyone can use it. Your political enemies can use it. Hostile countries can use it. Friendly countries can use it. It's a completely open network. And because it exists in this nexus of the energy commodity network, it's quite interesting. And it really might be seen, this is something we can explore in a later video, Bitcoin as the fulfillment of energy money. This was something that was dreamt up by Henry Ford, where he envisioned a neutral currency that, rather than being backed by precious metals or being backed by nothing, it would somehow be backed by energy. And I'm sure Satoshi Nakamoto was quite aware of Henry Ford's thoughts on this, and it did play a part into creating Bitcoin. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.